Snow in the winter of 1887 swallowed whole towns. You feel it in your own chest, as if you stood on a frozen doorstep with cracked boots and numb hands. Roads vanished. Families slept in kitchens to stay close to a dying fire. Bread lines froze before sunrise. Horses collapsed on ice roads while children carried buckets of melted snow from broken wells. You picture neighbors trading heat instead of coins, pressing stones against ribs while wind scraped through thin walls. The frozen winter of 1887 did not wait for permission. It pressed itself into every breath, every silent night, every shaking hand reaching for warmth. If you lived then, you would remember each hour by hunger, not time. A man named Tomas lived at the edge of a farmland village in the winter of 1887. He buried tools under snow, piles to protect metal from frost. His wife boiled thin broth from old grain and dried roots. Their 2 children slept near the hearth, wrapped in patched quilts. Travel stopped once drifts reached the height of fences. Fields once filled with wheat turned into white plains with no boundary. Nights stretched longer than memory. Tomas walked from door to door with a lantern tucked under his coat, delivering small handfuls of fuel to neighbors who lost their last embers. No one waited for government wagons or charity carts. They survived with shared effort and quiet courage through frozen hours. Before we go deeper, tell me where you watch from and what time glows on your screen. Settle your shoulders. Pull a blanket up to your chin. Slow your breath. Let your hands rest in your lap. If this story brings calm, press like, subscribe softly, and leave a quiet message so I know you reached this warm corner of the night. Snow pressed against Tomas's door before sunrise. He woke to muffled sound, like thick cloth dragged across wood. He sat up slow, rubbed his hands, and reached for coat. Floorboards cold through wool socks. He stepped toward window and pushed frost aside with knuckle. Outside lay a wall of snow nearly to the window's lower edge, smooth as a drift untouched by feet or tools. He breathed slow and steady, letting lungs adjust to cold air. He moved through kitchen and stirred last night's embers. He added 2 thin pieces of wood and waited for flame. Smoke curled low before rising through chimney. He boiled water, not for tea or broth yet, only to breathe warmth into room. His wife, Mara, sat up from quilts piled near hearth. Her hair pressed flat from sleep. She looked toward door with tired eyes, listening for any voices outside. None came. Their children, Luca and Anya, slept under quilts stitched from scraps. Tomas checked their foreheads, not for sickness, but to feel if they stayed warm through night. He placed heated stone wrapped in cloths near their feet and stood again. He stepped outside through back door, since snow blocked front. He pushed door hard until it cracked open, snow packed, thick and heavy. He dug with bare hands first, then grabbed small shovel leaning against frame. He cleared path enough to step outside. Cold air hit his face, sharp and dry. He pulled scarf higher and looked down road. No road showed. Only long white stretch, broken by faint shadows of fences. He walked toward woodpile behind house, piles smaller than expected, half buried. He dug with shovel, pulling logs free one at a time. He stacked them by door, counting each piece. Enough for 3 days, if used slow. He stopped counting and carried bundle inside. Mara peeled bark from roots stored in cloth bag. She ground bark into powder and sprinkled into boiling water. Luca woke first, rubbing eyes, hair messy. He walked a window and pressed face to glass. He whispered that he heard wolves in night. Thomas nodded and handed him bowl of hot water. Luca held bowl tight between hands and sat near hearth. Anya woke next. She reached for mother's hand. Mara lifted her and wrapped blanket around both. She sang short, simple tune. Thomas listened while tying rope around lantern for later. He stepped outside again, this time with lantern tucked under coat. He walked path toward neighbor's house. Snow reached his knees. He leaned into wind. He reached fence line where posts looked like short bumps beneath snow. He reached house of older couple, Henrik and Sophia, smoke thin from chimney. He knocked 3 times. Door opened a crack. Henrik peeked through, eyes red from cold night. Thomas handed him wrapped bundle of kindling. Henrik nodded and whispered thanks. Thomas backed away and headed to next house. He walked house to house, delivering wood or checking if roofs leaked. One house's roof sagged near ridge. Snow gathered heavy. Thomas climbed ladder, resting against outer beam. He pushed snow off edges with shovel. Wood groaned under weight relief. Mara's voice echoed in his memory, telling him not to climb roofs alone. He stayed cautious, kept feet wide, and worked slow. When finished, he climbed down and handed ladder to owner. By late morning, wind eased. Sun peeked through thin clouds. Snow sparkled, blinding. Thomas walked back home, pulse steady. He removed boots inside lintu and shook snow off coat. Inside, Mara poured thin broth into 3 cups. Thomas took his cup and drank slow, savoring heat. Mara asked how neighbors fared. He said most still warm, but worried about supplies if storms kept coming. She nodded and looked toward stacked wood by door. Children played with cloth scraps. Luca folded pieces into shapes. Anya lined them in row across floor. Thomas sat beside them and traced patterns stitched by Mara months earlier. Some squares patched from old coat. Others cut from curtains saved after summer trade. Afternoon came. Thomas packed tools and headed toward barn. He cleared snow from roof edges, pushing heavy sheets to ground. He stepped inside barn and checked animals. A few chickens huddled near straw. Goat pressed near wall, breath freezing in air. Thomas laid thicker straw across floor and placed bucket of melted snow near goat's head. He rubbed frost from hinges of door and closed it tight. He returned home and washed hands in warm water. He dried fingers on rough cloth. Mara showed him cracked pot. She asked if he could seal crack with resin stored in box by shelf. He melted resin scrap near flame and pressed it along crack line. He held pot still until resin set. She placed pot aside with quiet gratitude. As sun dipped, Thomas stepped outside again, lantern in hand. He walked toward well where snow piled high. Villagers gathered already. They dug narrow path to reach frozen lid. Tools struck ice with hollow sound. Thomas joined them. They chipped surface until small hole formed. Women filled buckets with meltwater from heated stones lowered into well. They carried buckets home, steam rising from rims. One man spoke about distant town, sending aid. Others listened, but eyes doubtful. Snow blocked roads. Horses slipped on ice. No one expected wagons soon. Thomas stayed silent, focusing on lifting buckets to ground. As darkness fell, he walked back with lantern undercoat. He reached home and placed bucket near hearth. Mara poured water into pot and added thin root slices. Children leaned near fire, hands stretched for heat. Night thick. Wind rose again. Walls creaked. Tomas placed board against door and checked window frames. He placed extra quilt across lower gap. He sat near hearth with children asleep on his knees. Mara stitched old glove of Anya's, patching thumb. Later, Tomas stepped outside to check roof again. Snow drifted fast. He climbed ladder and brushed snow aside. He paused, listening to wind blow across field. He saw faint flicker of lantern beyond fence. Not close. Not neighbor. Light moved slow, then vanished behind drift. Tomas narrowed eyes but returned to ladder, focusing on work. When finished, he returned inside and bolted door. He placed heated stone under children's feet and wrapped quilt tighter around Mara. He sat on floor, back against wall, letting warmth sink. He fell asleep in short bursts, waking when wind rattled shutter. Before dawn, soft scrape along door. Tomas opened eyes and listened. Not animal. Not storm. He stood and lifted lantern. He opened door a crack. Snow swept in. No person visible, but on step lay small bundle wrapped in torn wool. He lifted bundle inside. He unwrapped cloths slow. Inside lay dried berries, shrunken but edible. Tomas looked across field, but snow rose like wall. He set berries aside. He woke Mara to show her. She pressed lips together and placed handful in pot, mixing with broth. She said nothing loud, only quiet nod. Day broke, pale and slow. Tomas walked to neighbors again, delivering warmth, leaving silent thanks behind. Some thanked directly. Others held his hand tight. One woman asked if he saw lights across ridge last night. Tomas said he saw faint glow. She pressed hand to chest and whispered prayer. He returned home midday. He ate small portion of broth, saving most for evening. He sat near hearth and mended broken rope per lantern. Children napped, heads against wall. Afternoon wind fell. Snow settled smooth. He took sled and walked beyond last fence, checking traps. Most empty. One held rabbit stiff from cold. He carried rabbit home, skinned it by door, and hung meat above fire. Bones he saved for stew. He cleaned hide and stretched on board to dry. When sun fell again, he walked too well with neighbors. They formed line passing buckets. Tomas felt weary but steady. He looked across horizon and saw snow reflecting faint blue along distant ridge. He thought of lanterns seen night before. Back home, Mara served stew thicker than earlier days. Children ate small bites. Toma sat close to fire, eyes heavy. Mara leaned against his shoulder. They said little. Night descended. Tomas lay on floor with children, their breaths light. Heat from stones kept room warm enough. He listened to wind lift and drop around roof. He closed eyes. Tomas woke before the first hint of light reached the frost on the frozen window. The house felt colder than yesterday. Fire slept low, nothing more than a dull strip of ember. He crouched and placed a thin stick over the glow, blowing until flames stirred enough to catch. He warmed his hands, then lifted Mara's quilt to check if her breath stayed steady. She nodded faintly, half awake. The children shifted under blankets, still wrapped in sleep. He stepped outside through back door again. Snow firm and crusted after night winds pressed it down. He climbed small rise behind the barn to check for damage. The wind carved ridges along roof edges. He brushed loose snow away with a branch. Sky above looked grey, dull and silent. No birds, no tracks, only his own. He returned to house and collected the dried berries left on doorstep the night before. He placed them in cloth pouch and hung pouch near hearth. He wanted them to last through the week. Mara stirred pot of water with a sliver of root. She asked if he planned to walk toward Henrik's house. Tomas nodded. He filled a sack with kindling, wrapped cloth around his neck, and stepped out again. He followed path carved day before. It narrowed overnight from drifting snow. He widened path using shovel, pushing heavy sheets aside. He counted each push, steady, saving strength. When he reached Henrik's door, he found Sophia sitting on step, wrapped in shawl. Frost clung to ends of her hair. She held frozen bucket in hand and looked toward well. Thomas helped her rise and guided her back inside. He placed wood near hearth and checked roof seam. They thanked him with tired smiles. He moved on, reaching house of a man named Ilya. Only faint smoke from chimney. Tomas knocked. No answer. He opened door slightly and called inside. Ilya lay on floor near fire, hand clutching blanket. Not injured, only weak from long cold night. Tomas lifted him to chair and placed heated stone beneath blanket. He stirred coals until sparks caught. He filled pot with snow from outside and set it to warm. Ilya opened eyes slow and whispered thanks. Tomas stayed a few moments, then stepped out again. Leaving door latched tight. When he reached central path, he found 3 young men digging trench to reach buried fence line. They worked without speaking. Tomas joined them. They cleared half the length, stopping only when hands stiffened. One man pointed toward ridge where faint smoke rose in thin column. Too far to reach, but visible. The men argued whether it belonged to hunters or families stranded. Tomas watched silent. He planned to check later, once supplies secured. He returned home with cheeks raw from wind. Mara handed him small bowl of warm broth. Children sat by fire, rolling thin strips of cloth into cords. Anya tied ends into knots, proud of each twist. Tomas placed hand on her head, grateful for small moments. Later morning, Tomas repaired barn door hinge with metal scrap. He hammered lightly, careful not to split wood softened by moisture. He moved tools inside to keep them from freezing. Goat bleated softly. He scattered feed while talking to her in low tone, calming both of them. Midday brought sharper wind. Snow danced sideways. Tomas gathered villagers near Henrik's house to discuss plan to cut path to Wardridge that blocked travel. Some worried wolves watched from forest. Others feared nothing waited beyond ridge, except empty fields. Tomas suggested small group travel only to top of rise to see if smoke still climbed sky. Villagers agreed to wait until wind settled. Afternoon, Mara mended torn quilt while Tomas sat carving small shape from scrap wood. He shaped thin rod to strengthen sled handle. Children sat nearby, listening to sound of wind scrape against door. Dark came early again. He walked too well with lantern. Villagers gathered with buckets. They lowered heated stones to melt ice and pull water. Tomas took turns lifting rope with others, arms shaking from weight. Snowflakes collected in beard and brows. He pushed them away with glove dot. He carried bucket home, careful not to spill. Mara used water to scrub cloth squares, drying them near hearth. She placed bowl of warm water near door to thaw his fingers. Later night, Tomas stepped outside once more. Lantern held low. He listened to quiet stretch across land. He walked toward ridge with slow steps, boots sinking. He stopped near fallen fence post. The column of smoke he saw earlier faded, leaving only mist. He turned back. While walking home, he saw faint trail leading away from path, barely pressed into snow. Small steps, spaced uneven, heading toward frozen creek. Not wolf, not neighbor. He crouched and touched print, snow still soft in center. Recent he stood and followed a short distance until trail turned toward deeper woods. He stopped there. He had no torch for forest. He placed small piece of dried root from his pocket on trail, a quiet mark, then walked home. Back inside, Mara asked why, his face pale. He said wind stung harder on ridge. She narrowed eyes but said nothing, trusting his quiet explanation. She placed another heated stone under cat and pulled quilt tighter over children. Thomas sat with back to wall, listening to night settle. He thought about berries left in bundle and prints leading to woods. He wondered who moved through storms without knocking on doors. He lay down only when fire dimmed to glow dot. Before dawn, gentle knock stirred him awake. Not loud, patient, he opened door to cold air. Snow drifted against threshold. He found small folded cloth. Inside, thin strip of smoked meat, salted and tough. He looked out across dark field. Nothing moved. He placed meat next to berries and sealed both in cloth pouch. When Mara woke, he showed her pouch. She pressed it to chest and said gifts arrive from someone walking far. Thomas nodded, feeling same quiet thought. He walked outside when light returned, pushing shovel through heavy snow. He met Joran near path. Joran asked if Thomas left house last night. Thomas said only to check ridge. Joran said he heard footsteps near fence, but saw no light. They both stood silent a moment. Snow fell around them in small flakes. They returned to work. Thomas cleared path to barn again. He repaired rope on sled using carved rod. He tested pull strength by dragging empty sled across yard. It moved smoother than before. He smiled faintly. Next hours passed in steady tasks. He delivered wood to Henrik. He sealed cracked window with cloth soaked in melted resin. He checked goat and chickens, making sure straw thick enough. Later afternoon, villagers carved deeper path toward ridge. Thomas carried lantern and shovel. They reached crest and scanned field below. Only snow stretching long and flat. The smoke seen earlier gone. No figures. No movement. Wind touched edges of coats. They turned back, satisfied no threat approached. Evening found Thomas at home again. Mara prepared thicker stew with small bone pieces. Children sat by fire making cords again. Thomas rested on stool, head heavy. He let warmth, ease, stiffness, night settled calm. He listened for knocks, but none came. He slept deeper. Thomas woke to a soft humming sound across the frozen fields. Not wind, not animals. He sat up and listened. The walls creaked, settling after another night of heavy frost. He rubbed eyes, stood, and checked window. Pale blue light stretched across snow, smooth and unbroken. Mara slept still under quilt. Children stirred but did not rise yet. He wrapped coat around shoulders and stepped outside through back door. Air sharp. Breath rose in short bursts. He tested path with shovel, breaking thin crust formed overnight. Snow felt lighter than previous days, though still deep. He walked toward old fence near creek. boards nearly buried, only tops visible. He knelt and brushed snow from small patch of ice. Creek had frozen months earlier, but faint water moved beneath. He tapped ice with end of shovel. It thudded solid. Safe enough for now, unsafe for crossing later if thaw came too fast. He stood again. Returning home, he saw Henrik approach slowly, holding cane. Henrik asked for help repairing broken latch on his door. Tomas nodded and walked with him. At house, latch hung loose from one rusted nail. Thomas hammered new nail in sealing draft. Sophia thanked him with small cloth square sewn from leftover linen. As he left, Henrik mentioned hearing faint whistling near ridge last night. Not wind, but something that stopped mid. Thomas thought of footprints from earlier nights. He told Henrik he heard nothing but would watch again. He returned home as Mara ladled thin stew into clay bowl. Children sat cross-legged near fire, drawing lines in soot across floorboards. Anya dragged fingertip to form shapes. Luca leaned close, tracing shapes with stick. Tomas watched them silently, then cleaned soot with rag, leaving floor smooth again. Mid-morning, villagers gathered near hall. A man from Southern Row reported broken roof beam threatening collapse. Thomas joined group, carrying tools. They reached house. Beam bent slightly from snow pressure. They moved ladder inside and propped support beam under old one. Thomas hammered wedge into place. Roof steadied, tension easing. House owner clasped Thomas's hand with gratitude. They stepped outside as clouds darkened. Snowflakes drifted thick. Thomas and others hurried to hall before storm grew heavier. Inside hall, fires burned low, stones warming floor. People sat close, sharing news. One spoke of hearing distant voices near forest. Another said wolves howled 3 nights earlier, then went silent. Thomas listened, storing details, saying little. Storm intensified. Wind whistled under door frames. Tomas helped seal cracks with strips of wool. He pushed heavy bench against main door to block snow. Many stayed inside hall for warmth. Mara arrived with children to help hand out bowls of stew. Tomas took bowl and sipped slow. Heat softened cold in lungs. Mara sat beside him, shoulders touching. Children fell asleep soon after, curled on folded quilts. Tomas placed warm stone near their feet. Storm passed by. People left hall, heading home through deep snow. Tomas carried Luca and Anya while Mara held lantern. They reached house and cleared drift-blocking door. Inside, Tomas placed children by hearth and added another stick to fire. Mara unpacked bundle of scraps collected from hall. She sorted pieces by thickness, planning to sew gloves. Tomas prepared to head out again to check fences, but paused when he saw Mara's tired shoulders. He sat next to her for a short while, hands still. Later, he forced himself to return outside. He collected fallen branches blown from trees. He tied them together with rope and hauled to barn. He sorted branches by size and stored smaller pieces near hearth for kindling. He noticed new marks near boundary fence. Not footprints this time. Pale streaks in snow as if something dragged lightly over surface. He crouched and touched lines. Too thin to be sled runners. More like fabric trailing or branches carried by hand. Trail led north, then faded near tree stump. He followed path few steps, but wind erased lines quickly. He sighed and turned back toward home. As he crossed open field, he saw Mara standing by door, arms wrapped around shoulders. She watched him return. He stepped inside and removed coat. Children sat awake again, eyes bright after rest. They tugged on his hand, asking to hear story about summer harvest. Thomas spoke short tale about tall wheat and carts full of grain. They listened, eyes distant, almost forgetting cold. Night came early again. Thomas walked too well with neighbors. Snow deeper, forcing them to dig before reaching lid. They lowered heated stones, steam rising. Buckets lifted heavy with water. Thomas took to home. He filled pot while Mara washed children's hands and faces. They dried near fire, eyes drooping. After meal, Thomas stepped outside once more. Wind calm, stars faint. He walked to ridge, lantern low. Snow glowed pale. He stopped near same fence where he saw lines. He felt air shift, colder suddenly. He listened. Only distant crack of ice shifting near creek. He waited longer, breath slow. He turned back. Halfway home, he stopped. At far edge of field, faint glow moved between trees. Lantern or reflection. Glow dimmed quickly. Thomas held breath, watching. No sound followed. He walked home slower, thinking. Inside, he sat on floor near hearth. Mara brushed snow from his coat and hung it to dry. She asked if night quiet. He answered with simple nod. She knew there was more, but asked no further. He slept in short stretches. Each time he woke, he listened for footsteps. None came before dawn. Storm passed. Light wind-shaped snow into smooth dunes. He rose and carried sled to hall. He met Joran there, who brought news. Someone left bundle of bark at boundary early morning. Joran found it while clearing path. He handed it to Thomas. Bark different from local trees, lighter, smooth. Thomas recognized textures similar to piece left earlier weeks. He placed bark in pocket. Villagers gathered to discuss smoke scene last week. They planned to send small group with sled and rope once weather steadied. Thomas agreed to go. He returned home to prepare tools, axe, rope, cloth squares. He helped Mara seal windows. She patched quilt with new pieces. Children folded leftover scraps into shapes again. They giggled when wind howled outside, but sound felt less threatening now. Afternoon quiet. Snow drifted, but thinner. Thomas stood outside barn, watching horizon. He thought of wanderer who left meat and berries. He thought of faint glow among trees. He wondered if stranger passed again or moved on. He walked inside, shut door behind him, and sat near fire. He held bark, piece, and rolled it between fingers. He placed it with berries and cloth bundles. Evening brought calm. He carried lantern through village, checking each house. Henrik stronger today. Ilya stood near window, sipping warm broth. Sophia gifted Thomas small twists of dried herbs. He placed it in coat pocket. He returned home, tired but steady. Mara poured stew into bowls. Luca and Onya leaned against him, drifting to sleep quickly. Thomas covered them with quilt, pressed warm stone at their feet, and sat beside Mara. Night, long but peaceful. Thomas woke with sun hidden behind grey clouds. He rose, stretched stiff arms, and stepped outside. Snow no longer fell, but wind held sharp bite. He cleaned frost from doorframe and shoveled narrow path toward barn. His breath hung long in cold air. He checked roof edges again. Still thick with snow, though stable, Mara prepared warmed water with a pinch of herbs from Sophia. Children slowly woke, rubbing eyes, reaching for warmth. Thomas held each child close before stepping outside again. Today, he planned to meet others near Hull to form team for ridge watch. He strapped rope around sled and loaded small tools, shovel, axe, cloth squares. He walked through packed path to Hall. Group of villagers waited. Priest assigned tasks. Thomas and 3 others would check ridge and search for signs of life beyond front fields. They prepared for half-day walk. No overnight planned. They set out, boots sinking with each step. Thomas led with shovel to break crust. Snow reached a mid-calf. Sun filtered through clouds, lighting white surface faint. They walked past boundary fence and up gentle slope. Wind grew louder. Air carried new sound, like distant cracking wood. At ridgetop, their view stretched far. Snow plains rolled in waves. They scanned horizon. No smoke, no tents. Only bare land under sky. One man pointed to faint line-crossing fields, narrow and slightly curved. Hard to tell if path formed by wolves or human feet. Thomas stepped closer and brushed snow with glove. Line straight, then turned gently toward grove of tall pines. He felt edges, soft. Recent they followed, trail slow, staying alert. Each mark filled quickly with drifting flakes. They reached edge of pines, but stopped when wind grew stronger, dropping snow from branches. Branches bent low. Thomas decided to turn back, prioritizing safety. They marked location with small pile of stones. They would return after thaw. On way back, Thomas found piece of cloth stuck on broken branch. Cloth, dark grey, torn at edges. He pulled it free and examined. Rough wool, not belonging to any neighbor. He folded it and tucked into coat. They returned to village before midday. Hall offered warm rest. Thomas shared findings with Priest, who studied cloth. Priest whispered someone out there walked alone. He instructed group to keep watch from ridge evenings. Thomas returned home, tired, shoulders heavy. Mara set bowl of broth in front of him. He ate slow, mind focused on cloth and trail. Children sat nearby, making tiny snowmen from fresh snow tracked inside. He brushed melted snow from floor. Afternoon turned darker early. Thomas helped Henrik fix window seal. They pressed thick cloth into gap and hammered small nails. Wind hiss reduced. Henrik thanked Thomas and offered old jar of pickled vegetables. Thomas declined at first, but Henrik insisted. Thomas accepted jar, placing it carefully in sled. He visited Ilya next, checking fire. Ilya stood, stronger today. Thomas placed wood near hearth. Ilya spoke brief words about strange light he saw near creek. Thomas listened, noting light sighted multiple times. He returned home to hang jar of vegetables near shelf, saving it for hardest days. Mara nodded approval, relieved to see something different from broth and roots. Evening came. Snow glowed, lavender under sky. Thomas walked too well with neighbors. They lowered stones again and lifted water. Cold numbed hands, but routine steadied minds. On return, Thomas paused near boundary fence. He studied ground with lantern low. No footprints tonight. No cloth pieces. Only silent snow smoothing over earth. Still, he felt someone out there, moving without leaving sound. Inside, Mara handed him child's glove half sewn. She asked if he saw anything. He said no, but his eyes told other story. She accepted silence as answer. Children slept early, fatigue from cold day. Tomas tucked quilt around them. Mara sat beside him while he sharpened axe blade with stone. He tested edge, nodded, set blade aside, night deep. Fire crackled low. Tomas sat awake longer than usual. He replayed trail found near pines. He remembered dragging marks by fence. He thought of new cloth and previous bundles. Someone traveled through storms, leaving small gifts. Hours later, Tomas finally lay down, but sleep short. He woke to wind pushing small clumps of snow through window crack. He stood and sealed crack with cloth scrap. He walked outside, needing air. He stepped into tunnel-like path he carved earlier. Snow tall on sides. Moon glowed dim behind clouds. He reached ridge again. He stood still. No sound but wind brushing branches. He turned back as he neared home. Slight rustling behind tree caught his ear. He spun, lantern raised. Only snow fell from branch. He let breath even out. Inside, he warmed hands before fire. He heard Mara murmur in sleep. Children curled near each other. Tomas watched them. Strength restored with each breath they drew. Morning returned under quiet sky. No storm, Tomas felt relief. Supplies low, but spirits higher today. Mara smiled once, first in days. Children giggled as Luca made small puppet of old cloth. Tomas walked to hall again, meeting group to plan next path clearing. They extended path beyond barn, anticipating thaw turning snow to heavy slush. Tomas shoveled edges, packing snow firm. Work warmed their bodies. He checked with Henrik and Sophia again. Both stronger. He gifted them small cloth squares Mara finished. They thanked him warmly. Later, Tomas inspected next house in row. Smoke strong from chimney. Warmth inside, stable. He moved further, ensuring safety along line. Each task small but important. Evening calm. Tomas returned home to hearty stew. Mara added pinch of herbs, sent Richa. Children smiled more, energy returning. He stepped outside once more, lantern lit. He walked toward ridge, but not far. Snow glittered under thin moon. He stood and inhaled deeply. He felt winter loosening its hold day by day. He turned and walked back into warm glow of home. He placed hand on door and paused. He whispered thanks for remaining steady one more day. Night closed, peaceful. Tomas woke to sound of dripping water along the roof's edge. Not thaw, only slight melt where heat from chimney reached ice. He rose and pulled on boots. Snow outside felt lighter underfoot. Wind quiet. He stepped through path toward barn, checking if any beam shifted. Goat stood near door, stamping hooves, impatient for feed. Tomas laid fresh straw and poured warm water into pail. He walked back inside and found Mara folding worn shirts into strips. She handed Tomas' bundle of cloth squares to deliver later. Luca and Anya pressed scraps into small dolls, humming to themselves. Tomas touched their heads, then wrapped coat and stepped out again. Today he planned to visit abandoned mill road. Few traveled that direction recently. He loaded sled with tools, rope, and fire starter. He walked steady, boots sinking half depth into snow. He passed row of homes, smoke thin but rising. He nodded to neighbors clearing steps. Mill road started near Riverbend. Drift piled high at entrance. Tomas cut path slow, shovel striking crust. Air crisp. sun hid behind low clouds. Eventually he reached clearing where mill once stood. Wheel now encased in ice, wood splintered by storms of past seasons. Snow-covered broken beams, only tips visible. He walked around structure, checking if roof held. One corner collapsed inward. He collected usable boards and tied them to sled. He found rusted hinge half buried and placed it in pocket. Each piece worth saving. As he turned to leave, faint print along path caught his eye. Not his, not villagers. Single row of steps weaving a long creek line. Weight light, stride long. He followed few meters until print shifted onto deeper drift. Snow-filled depressions fast. He paused, stared across open land. No movement. He dragged sled home, load heavier now. At village edge, children watched him approach. They touched boards and asked if new roof pieces. Tomas smiled, nodding. He reached home. Mara stepped outside to help unload. She stacked boards against wall and inspected hinge. She said it might fix cupboard door inside. Tomas warmed hands and served broth with grain bits. Children ate first. Mara ate next. Tomas finished last. He then sorted boards into piles. Wide planks for roof, narrow strips for tools, broken pieces for fire dot. Afternoon, villagers gathered to reinforce hall door for next storm. Tomas helped nail crossbeam. He used cloth squares to wrap metal where it rubbed wood. Priest stood nearby, praying quietly. When finished, hall felt tighter, safer. Later, Tomas took sled toward far end of village. He delivered cloth squares to families with weaker fires. One door opened slowly, revealing woman wrapped in multiple shawls, face red from cold. She accepted, square eyes tired. Tomas handed her small stick of wood to. She thanked him, voice cracking. He moved further until reached last cottage before ridge. He placed square on step, knocked once, and left. No one opened door. Smoke faint from chimney, so heat still present. Sun lowered. Tomas returned home. Mara prepared stew, thicker with vegetables Henrik gifted earlier. Children cried out in surprise at taste. Tomas ate, grateful for change. After meal, he stepped outside again, lantern low. He walked to ridge path. Snow glittered under pale sky. He saw broken branch lying across trail. Not unusual, but bark chipped at odd angle. He crouched and lifted branch. It felt warm on one side, as if held recently. He placed branch back and stood listening. Wind soft. He walked further until reached boundary tree. He touched bark with gloved hand, smooth. No new cloth or bundle. He lingered longer than usual, then headed back. Night deeper. Tomas sealed door and sat near fire. Mara stitched doll clothing for children. Luca and Anya slept curled close. Tomas cleaned axe blade and set tools aside. He slept soon after, though mind returned to footprints near Mill Road. Before dawn he woke suddenly. House quiet. He rose and opened door with lantern. Snow drifted lightly. At edge of path, small pile of twigs arranged in circle. Tomas knelt, studying pattern. Twigs bent slightly, tips darkened. He pocketed them, puzzled. He walked to hall early. Priest there, boiling water. Tomas showed twigs. Priest rubbed them, brows tightening. He said pattern reminded him of sin used by traveling traders seasons ago to mark safe paths. Tomas asked why, placed silently. Priest shrugged, saying some people shared directions without speaking. Scouts gathered again to clear path toward ridge. Thomas joined but kept twigs in coat pocket. Snow deeper but less dense. They cleared wide section to allow future sleds. Work slow, hands numb. Mid-morning, Mara brought warm cloth squares to haul. She placed them near fire. She asked Thomas to help later with sewing outer coats for children. He agreed with nod. Thomas dragged sled back home. He found Mara at table measuring cloth. She cut pieces to fit children's shoulders. Thomas held cloth while she stitched. They worked side by side in silence. Afternoon, Thomas checked weather. Sky brightened. Heat rose slightly from ground. He walked to creek and tapped ice. Thinner sound this time. Soon thaw could break surface. He returned home and warned villagers to avoid creek crossing. Evening came. Thomas stepped outside with lantern. He walked to ridge again. This time he turned left, following creek longer. Snow deeper there. He heard faint crunching behind him. He turned, lantern revealing empty path. Sound ceased. He turned forward again, heartbeat slow but strong. He reached clearing where snow formed hollow near fallen tree. Inside hollow, he found single footprint deeper than others. He pressed glove into print. Edges still sharp. He rose and looked around. No one nearby. He walked home, steps heavy. Inside, Mara placed a bowl of stew before him. He ate slow, thinking of print. Children played with dolls on rug. He pressed hand on children's backs, grounding himself. Night, quiet. He listened to winds shift direction. From south now, warmer, he slept deeper. Thomas rose before sunrise, stirred embers into flame, and warmed his hands until fingers loosened. He stepped outside and found snow hardened overnight, crisp under boots. The air held a faint scent of thaw. Not warmth, but a shift he felt along his skin. He walked paths around the house, reinforcing walls with packed snow to keep wind from seeping inside. Mara folded quilts near hearth, preparing for colder hours ahead, though morning felt still. He returned to barn, checking animals again. Goat stood restless, pawing straw. Thomas filled bucket with warm water and set it down. He brushed frost off wooden posts, testing their strength. He then walked toward woodpile and inspected seams where branches pressed against shed. Each step a simple duty. He worked slow, gathering strength for later tasks. Mara called from doorway. She held basket of cloth squares ready for exchange. Thomas took half to deliver across village. He walked door to door, handing squares to neighbors mending coats. He checked roofs, pressing snow off edges. Small repairs kept homes warm enough through long nights. Near midday, he walked a hall. Priest spoke with Joran about sending groups south once snow receded enough for sled routes. They weighed ropes and tools needed. Thomas listened and agreed to join group, but insisted on waiting until creek safe to cross. Joren handed Thomas a folded note written on thin paper, giving details about new boundary markers seen in north. Marks shaped in lines similar to twigs he found. Thomas tucked note in coat, mind-tracing patterns. He left hall and followed creek path. Snow, shallow, near edge. Surface ice-covered cracks with thin glassy layer. Water moved below, slow but present. Thomas knelt and pressed palm flat. He then walked along bank until reached hollow discovered last night. Footprints still faint, though softened. He circled area, searching for more. Only shallow impressions in deeper drift. A call echoed behind him. Joran waved from ridge, pointing to Wardlow Hill. Tomas walked over. They stood side by side on rise, looking south. Sun weak but brighter than earlier weeks. They discussed route over ridge once Thor steady. Tomas traced path with finger across field. Afternoon wind softened. Tomas returned home. Mara prepared water with herbs. Children sat sewing simple threads into cloth patches. Luca tied pieces into cords, while Anya shaped them into pretend blankets. Tomas smiled and helped them knot ends tighter. Later, villagers gathered along outer path to dig deeper channels for runoff. If Thor rushed too fast, water could flood lower homes. Tomas guided shovel strokes, packing snow walls firm. Others followed his lead. He walked to Henrik's house, repairing hinge on storage chest. Sophia offered him dried leaves flavored with salt. Tomas accepted, saving them for stew. Evening came. Tomas heated pots over fire, adding leaves, bones, and thin slices of root. He stirred slow, steam rising in soft wisps. Mara tasted spoonful, nodded in approval. Children held bowls warm against hands. After meal, Tomas walked outside, lantern low. He followed ridge path, watching shadows stretch across snow. He reached boundary tree. No bundles today. He touched bark and stepped away. He turned north, walking slow. Branches of tall pines swayed lightly. He felt eyes watching from beyond tree line, though saw nothing. He waited. Silent minutes passed. He turned back. Approaching village, he noticed faint streaks in snow near fence, small dips from narrow sled or dragline. He crouched, brushing snow aside. Tracks fresh. He followed short distance until they veered toward creek. He stopped, not crossing. He left small strip of cloth on stake near path and returned home. Inside, Mara stitched her final cloth strip of night. Children slept. Tomas sat by fire sharpening tool edges. He placed bark, twigs, and cloth pieces together on shelf, forming small pile of clues. He stared at them long. He slept lightly. Dawn pressed in early. He rose and saw frost forming along inner window frame. He scraped frost away and stepped outside. Snow soft now, melting slightly on surface. He felt Thor approach. He walked to hall and met group preparing new route south. They marked first stretch, clearing snow to height of boots. Tomas carved path with shovel, placing stones at intervals to mark line. They reached first hill, then returned to warm hall. Priest asked Tomas if he believed traveler still near village. Tomas said no words, but his silence answered enough. Priest placed hand on his shoulder. Afternoon, Mara asked Tomas to fetch more water for washing cloth. He walked too well. Snow lower around lid now. He lowered heated stone and pulled water up. As he filled bucket, he saw distant bird land on fence post. First he had seen in weeks. He carried bucket back. Mara washed cloth squares, while children rinsed hands in warm basin. Tomas dried cloth near fire. Later, Tomas visited barn again. Roof beams held strong. He stacked wood precisely, leaving smaller pieces near door. He filled animal trough and checked latch. Evening sky shifted colors, faint rose and silver. Tomas stood outside long, watching horizon stretch open. He walked toward ridge one more time. Wind, little more than breath. Path easier now. He stopped, listening. Snow crunched behind him. He turned sharply. At edge of tree line, figure stood, still under branches, face hidden beneath hood, shape thin, leaning slightly. Tomas held lantern higher. Light flickered across tree bark, but figure did not move. He stepped closer, one cautious step. Figure stepped back into shadow, not fleeing, only fading. Tomas reached hand forward but held ground. He said nothing. Silence carried more weight. Figure lifted small bundle and placed it on snow, then turned and slipped between pines. No sound followed. Tomas knelt and picked bundle. Inside lay folded cloth and small chip of carved wood. 3 lines cut across surface. He closed cloth and tucked it to chest. He looked toward trees again, but saw no further trace. He walked home slowly. Lantern dimmed with each step. Snow sparkled faint under moon. He entered house quietly, placed bundle on table, and sat before fire. Mara stirred and asked if he found trouble. Tomas shook head and whispered that winter carried more footsteps than village alone. She pressed his hand and returned to sleep. Tomas sat wakeful long before resting his head. Tomas woke with a heaviness behind his ribs. Not fear, not sickness. Something like a weight from words unsaid. He sat up, stretched shoulders, and checked the bundle left near ridge last night. He unfolded cloth and examined carved wood chip again. The 3 lines were thinner than earlier ones, etched deeper, cleaner, as if carved with sharper tool. He placed chip beside twigs and bark on shelf, arranging them in small pattern. Mara watched from her blanket but said nothing. She trusted him to speak when ready. He stirred fire until flames steadied. The house warmed slow. Children woke, rubbing eyes. Luca asked if they would walk to hall today. Tomas nodded, saying they needed new cloth strips for patching sled handles. Mara handed them small bundles to carry, proud of their growing role in chores. Outside, snow softened into thick crust that cracked under steps. Sky held pale warmth, though air still harsh. Thomas shoveled path toward barn, creating wide trail to help sled runners glide smoother. He checked goat again and brushed straw to keep floor dry. He patched small hole in roof above animal stalls using plank from mill ruins. After chores, he guided family to hall. Villagers gathered, talking softly about Thor. Priest said snow might break by week's end if wind shifted south again. Many nodded with hope, but kept expectations quiet. Tomas delivered cloth squares, placing them near repair piles. Joren pulled Tomas aside. He said he saw traces of trail Tomas mentioned days earlier. Joren described tracks, curving toward old hunting route, barely pressed. Tomas listened, then shared sight of hooded figure. Joren's face grew tense, though he hid worry behind steady breath. He said they should approach with caution. Tomas agreed. They planned patrols each evening in pairs. Tomas would join, though he preferred silence over confrontation. They returned to hall for stew. Mara handed bowls to children. Their eyes lit when they tasted broth thickened with vegetables and herbs. Tomas ate small portion and saved rest for later. Afternoon, Tomas carried tools to Central Path. Snow still deep near river crossing. If Thor came fast, ice might break without warning. He hammered stakes into snow to mark safe width. Others followed, aligning stakes to create narrow passage. When finished, they stepped back and surveyed line. Villagers spoke about traveling south soon. They hoped to trade cloth, hides, and dried roots for grain. Thomas said he would guide path if ice melted enough. Priest reminded them to move slow, not rush past stability. Calm settled over group. Thomas returned home to prepare supplies. He folded rope and tied knots carefully. He sharpened axe blade again. He placed lantern near door, trimmed wick for longer burn. He then washed hands in warm water and sat beside Mara at table. She mended torn glove for Luca. Thomas held glove while she stitched. Their silence felt shared, not empty. Children played near hearth, dragging carved wooden blocks across floor. Anya made small line of shapes, imitating tokens Thomas kept on shelf. Luca built tower and knocked it down, laughing. Thomas smiled, briefly forgetting winter's pressure. Evening shadows lengthened. Patrol began. Thomas walked with Joran, lantern low, to avoid drawing too much attention. Snow squeaked under boots. They reached ridge path. Wind quiet, only distant creak of ice shifting. They paused near boundary tree. Thomas pointed to hollow where Bundle placed nights before. Joran studied marks, but found no new prints. They moved north through pines. Trees tall, branches heavy with frost. Lantern glow touched bark in narrow beam. Thomas slowed, sensing presence, not threat, something observing. They waited, breaths even. Snow fell in small flakes, drifting sideways. After a long moment, Joran tapped Thomas's shoulder. They turned back, respecting silence of woods. Upon returning to hall, other patrollers reported nothing unusual. Thomas hung lantern and walked home. He entered house and set boots by hearth. Mara looked up from sewing. She asked if he met anyone. Thomas shook head. She nodded and returned to stitching pattern along quilt edge. He ate small bowl of stew, though hunger faint. He watched fire and thought about strangers' silent approach. Why leave food? Why never speak? He placed carved chip in hand and traced lines again before setting it down. Night deepened. Thomas slept quietly. Children curled against each other. Mara slept with hand near his shoulder. He breathed steady. He woke before dawn to gentle tapping from outside. He rose and stepped to door. He opened slowly. Snow drifted inside. No person visible. At threshold lay new bundle wrapped in thin cloth. Thomas lifted it with care and closed door. He unfolded cloth before firelight. Inside lay dried seeds, small and dark. He pressed seeds between fingers. Hard shell, not local. Tribe from south used seeds like these for broth and oil. Thomas placed handful in small dish. He saved rest for planting once ground thawed. He rewrapped cloth and set bundle beside others. Mara woke and saw seeds. She touched them with gentle reverence. She tied thread around cloth, marking date and place of origin. Thomas nodded, grateful she preserved details. Morning brighter. Thomas walked to barn to tend animals. Goat restless again, sensing warmer ground. Thomas filled trough and checked gate. He then stacked firewood near door for later dot. At hall, villagers met to discuss first trade journey. They chose 3 to travel. Thomas, Joran, and another man named Pavel. They would leave once creek safe. Groups prepared packs. Mara stitched thick cloth for Thomas's coat sleeves. She tightened seams and reinforced edges Children walked with Thomas to hall, helping carry cloth bundles. They handed them to older women who stored them for trade. Priest blessed group quietly, thanking winter for thinning slowly. Afternoon sun faint but present. Thomas walked to creek once more, checking water beneath ice. Cracks spread wider. He tapped edge and water splashed small droplets through gap. Soon crossing impossible. He marked danger with tall branch stuck in snow. On return, he saw shadow near ridge. He slowed, hooded figure stood at distance, same posture as before. Thomas raised hands slightly. Figure did not flee. Thomas stepped forward 3 steps, then stopped. He spoke low. No reply. Wind shifted. Snow-blurred figures outline. When gust passed, figure gone. Ground held no clear marks. Thomas stood still, listening. He felt no threat, only distance. He walked home. He carved thin piece of wood inside, while Mara prepared stew thicker tonight. Children danced around table, laughing softly. Thomas passed them small rations of dried berries as treat. Night came gentle. Thomas placed warm stones along wall. He sat near fire while Mara hummed tune. Children fell asleep in quilt nest. Before Thomas slept, he walked outside once more. He carried no lantern this time. Moon bright enough to guide steps. Snow reflected pale silver. He reached ridge and looked beyond. Land open, stretching far. He whispered thanks into still air, unsure who heard. He returned and slept. Wind eased through branches with a lighter touch than earlier weeks. Thomas woke before first light and sat upright slowly, feeling joints loosen. The house held steady warmth from stones placed along wall. He stood and warmed hands at hearth. Flames flickered through ash, asking for new wood. He added thin pieces, letting fire catch without waste. Mara slept curled beneath quilt, one hand resting across children. Their hair pressed flat, breaths soft. Thomas stepped outside quietly, closing door without rattle. Snow crunched beneath boots. Instead of deep powder, it shifted like packed sand. A sign thaw edged closer, though ice still ruled the ground. He walked toward ridge path with shovel in hand. He widened trail, scraping snow into short banks. He paused often, studying distance for movement. Nothing stirred except wind brushing dry branches. Once path cleared, he returned home for tools to patch barn roof before warmer weather loosened beams. He climbed ladder carefully, hammering nails into plank from mill ruins. Resin dripped along seams, sealing gaps where future rain might seep. He finished work and climbed down, stepping back to check angle of boards. Satisfied, he carried ladder to wall and leaned it upright. Mara stepped outside holding folded cloth. She pointed to torn coat of Luca. Thomas took coat and inspected seam. He promised to fix once hands rested. She nodded and returned inside. He then walked to hall to check progress on trade route. Joran stood inside, packing rope and spare cloth. Priest laid bundle of dried roots on table. Pavel marked map in charcoal, tracing safe lines along ridge. Thomas joined them, adjusting plan according to new cracks forming along creek. By midday, Thomas stepped away to fetch water. Snow low around, well, ice thinner. He lowered heated stone and pulled bucket heavy with milk. He carried it home with steady steps. Mara filled basin for washing cloth. Children sat nearby, rinsing their hands, giggling when drops splashed. Later afternoon, Tomas visited Henrik to deliver coat patches. Henrik spoke about hearing distant knocking along northern tree line. Not animal, not wind. Short taps, 3 in rhythm. Tomas considered pattern, similar to traveler signs seen weeks ago. He held thought inside, thanked Henrik, and returned outside. He walked toward Pine Grove, careful to stay on packed snow. Near edge, he found broken branch freshly snapped. He knelt and examined break. Clean cut, not gnawed by animal. He held piece to lantern and noted faint mark of sharp blade. He placed branch in pocket for later. Returning to village, he saw children building snow wall for play. Their laughter drifted across frozen yard. He walked past them, giving small nod. He reached home, handed branch to Mara, and asked her to store it. She placed it beside other pieces on shelf. Evening settled. Tomas prepared stew using last of pickled vegetables. Mara added seeds gifted earlier, grinding them before cooking. The broth thickened with nutty scent. Luca ate fast, then slept early from full stomach. Anya curled beside, fire humming. Tomas stepped outside after meal. Snow reflected pale pink from fading sun. He walked along ridge once more. No figure tonight, only silent trees. He placed carved token on boundary branch, pressing firmly so wind would not steal it. Then he turned back. Inside, he sharpened blade slowly. Mara finished sewing coat for Luca, folding it carefully. Tomas placed repaired tools near door, ready for early departure when trade group left. He sat close to fire with children asleep. Mara leaned against his shoulder. They rested in quiet night, fell. Tomas woke twice from drifting dreams of footsteps in snow. He listened before settling again. Before dawn, soft scraping outside stirred him. He opened door quietly. On step, a strip of wood lay with 3 shallow cuts parallel. He lifted it, nodding once, and shut door. He studied strip by firelight. Lines matched previous markings. He placed it with others on shelf. He then wrote small note on thin paper, marking date and location, though no words explained reason. He folded note and tucked it between carvings. Sun-brightened sky. He stepped outside to find lower drifts across field. Snow thinned at edges where ground absorbed warmth. He walked a creek to judge crossing. Ice cracked under gentle tap. Travel soon required new path inland. He returned to hall for meeting. Priest lifted cloth bundle filled with seeds, bark, and markings. He acknowledged traveler presence silently and asked group to show respect without pursuit. Tomas agreed. Others nodded. Afternoon filled with preparation. Tomas tied rope to sled, checked wheels, and tested torch wicks. Joran repaired iron hook. Pavel counted dried roots for trade. They planned to leave 2 mornings from now, if weather steady. Tomas returned home to find Mara airing quilts. Children knocked snow off boots. He joined them, folding fabrics for a travel pack. He placed seeds in small pouch to carry south. He left wood carvings at home, safe under Mara's care. Evening. Villagers gathered near hall for final winter meal before journey. Simple dishes placed across table, dried fish, broth, salted leaves, and thin bread pressed from leftover flour. Tomas ate slowly, eyes traveling across faces shaped by weeks of cold. After gathering, Tomas walked outside alone. Cloud gap revealed stars brighter than usual. He looked south, beyond ridge, imagining long trail across fields. He turned to path where stranger once stood. He whispered short thanks for seeds and guidance. He walked home with slow steps. Lantern dim, he slept with steady breath, ready for road ahead. Tomas woke before anyone else. He stood in doorway and looked across fields still heavy with snow. Those surface glistened with thin ice shells formed overnight. He stepped outside and tested ground with boot. Snow sank a little, but resistance stronger than earlier days. He returned inside, warmed hands, and knelt to tie rope for sled inspection. Mara sat up, eyes soft. She asked if day felt right for travel. Tomas said weather turned steady, though only for short distance. Children stirred from quilts, stretching arms. Mara wrapped coats around them and handed small cloth to Tomas. She said he should carry squares sewn from bits of 3 different fabrics. He tucked it in inner pocket, a small sign of home. He kissed each child's head and stepped outside, gathering packs from bench.hall. Joran and Pavel waited, rope coiled, sled ready. Priest placed small pouch of dried roots inside pack. He pressed Tomas's shoulder, asking them to return before next storm. Tomas nodded, face set. They began trek south, following path carved days earlier. Snow deep, but packed enough for sled runners to slide with force. Cold air stung cheeks. Tomas led Joran behind sled, Pavel guarding rear. They moved in silence, each footstep measured. Land opened into wide plain beyond ridge. Sun behind clouds cast long muted shadows across field. They paused at creek edge. Ice cracked lightly under Joran's boot. Tomas pointed farther west along bank. They walked until ice thickened beneath shaded bend. They crossed slowly, arms wide for balance. Sled glided behind them, rope taut. Farther, trees thinned into sparse clusters. Sounds softened. Tomas noticed faint footprints ahead, older than recent nights. 2 sets, spaced long apart. He knelt, brushed frost aside, then rose. He said nothing, but group shifted grips on rope. They reached broken cart, half buried in drift. Wheels rotted, frame cracked. Nothing inside but splintered boards. Pavel tapped frame, finding no scrap worth saving. They moved on, next miles silent, except for crunch of snow. Tomas felt weight of past winter hours pressing like stone. He remembered nights sharing warmth, seeds at doorstep, carved wood tokens. Wind brushed his face with familiar chill. When midday approached, they sheltered behind low ridge, building small fire shielded by snow wall. Tomas boiled handful of roots and seeds. Steam drifted thin. They ate in slow bites, sharing silence. Joran pointed toward Far Hill. Faint trail curved into deeper snow. Tomas observed shape. Path not made by animal. Steps careful, weight light. He stood, ready to follow, but group still needed to reach trading post farther south. Tomas weighed choice. He bent and placed thin stick at trail entry, marking direction for return. They resumed main path. Hours later, wind shifted. Low howl echoed across open ground. They stopped and listened. Sound repeated. Not wolves, not distant call, more like branch hitting hollow wood at steady rhythm. Tomas narrowed eyes and scanned horizon. They continued south until sun lowered. They reached abandoned storage shed, walls half collapsed. Tomas inspected inside for shelter signs. Only dusted crates and empty sacks. No fresh ash. No food. They turned back. Trade trip postponed until roads safe. Snow too deep. They loaded sled and retraced steps. This time, wind behind them eased journey. Tomas watched trees, alert for movement. Near creek, he saw faint shape across field. Hooded figure walking parallel to ridge, slow and steady. Tomas stopped others with raised hand. They watched shape glide between drifts, not approaching, not retreating. Moving with purpose, Joran whispered suggestion to follow. Tomas shook head. They stood quiet while figure faded behind slope. Snow swallowed sound. They crossed creek again, reaching ridge before dusk. Village smoke rose in thin ribbons. They reached hall, tired shoulders sagging. Others greeted them with relief, but no celebration. They unpacked cloth squares and dried roots inside storage room. Tomas walked home slow. Mara waited outside, hands clasped. She helped him unlace boots and brushed frost from hair. Children hugged his legs, voices hushed. Tomas sat near hearth, while Mara placed warm broth in his hands. He told her of abandoned cart and footprints. He mentioned figure across field. Mara listened without shock, as if expecting such patterns. She placed seeds into jar for future planting. Tomas peeled wet cloth from pocket and placed it on shelf with other tokens, night deep. Tomas stepped outside once more. Snow soft undertows. Sky clear enough to see low stars. He walked short distance to ridge. He stood alone, breath steady. He placed hand on branch and whispered simple hope for safe passage of those unseen. He returned home, fire low, stones warm, children asleep. Mara weaving cloth under dim lamp. Tomas lay beside them, body heavy but calm. He fell asleep without dream. Tomas woke late, soreness spreading through shoulders from long walk south. He pushed himself up slowly, letting warmth from stones near wall loosen muscles. Mara slept sitting upright against quilts, needle still in hand where she drifted off. He took needle gently and set it aside. Children slept tangled against each other, one arm across his leg. He stayed still a moment, listening to quiet house, letting silence steady him. He rose softly and stepped into pale morning. Snow shimmered like crushed salt. The sky lighter than previous days, though chill held firm. He cleared path with shovel, pushing snow away from door, making wide arc in case others visited. Ground beneath crust felt firmer. Synthor approached slowly. He walked a barn to check animals. Goat stamped ground, waking earlier than usual. Tomas brushed frost from trough and filled it with warm water. He scattered straw and checked beams patched earlier. Everything held strong. He patted animals back before stepping outside. Mara joined him soon after, wrapping shawl close. She asked about path south again. Tomas said ice too fragile for carts, but safer for short travel. She nodded, handing him small bundle of seeds to grind later. Children followed, rubbing eyes, dragging blankets over shoulders. Tomas sent them back inside to warm hands before chores. Villagers gathered near hall soon after. Priest held brief talk, asking those who traveled south to rest before clearing next route west. Joran suggested building markers along new trail to guide others once weather eased. Tomas agreed and offered to carve small signs from leftover boards. They split tasks. Pavel and Joran walked toward creek to measure new cracks. Tomas returned home to gather scraps. He cut planks into small rectangles, smoothing edges with blade. He carved short symbols into each piece, lines simple, marking directions more than messages. He wrapped them in cloth, ready to place along ridge later. Mara placed a bowl of broth in front of him while he worked. Children watched, tracing symbols on wood with fingertips. Tomas explained each line meant path, crossing, or stop. Their eyes widened, proud to understand. Midday, Tomas walked path alone, carrying carved markers. He placed first near village edge, pressing it into snow at angle. He walked further toward ridge and placed second. Snow quiet beneath boots, wind low. He paused at ridge and studied field beyond, remembering figure from day before. Nothing moved now. He placed third marker near grove where footprints led nights earlier. As he turned to leave, rustling drew his attention. He raised lantern. A piece of cloth hung from low branch, dark, frayed edges. He pulled it free and smelled faint scent of smoke. He folded cloth, placing it inside coat. He returned to village and stopped at Henrik's house. Henrik sat on step, face tired. Tomas gave him one of the markers to place near his home for safe passage. Henrik nodded and set it near fence. Later afternoon, children played near hall building tiny forts in snow. Tomas hammered new pegs into sled runners, tightening joints loosened by a previous journey. Joran returned and reported cracks widened along creek. Future travel needed detour inland. Tomas took note and adjusted map with new line. Evening brought hush. Neighbors gathered for small gathering inside hall. They shared stew, breadcrumbs, and old stories from summers before winter stretched long. Tomas sat near wall, eyes soft, listening while children curled beside him. Mara sang quiet tune, smoothing hair from Anya's forehead. Lucas fell asleep, leaning on Tomas's shoulder. Tomas placed warmed stone by their feet. Fire crackled low. After meal, Tomas stepped outside. He walked to ridge alone, lantern kept low to protect wick from wind. Snow reflected faint light. He moved slow, eyes scanning horizon. Still no movement, but weight in air hinted presence. He reached old boundary tree. He pressed hand to trunk, tracing rough bark. He pulled cloth left earlier nights to check if moved. Still tied. He placed piece of new cloth beside it, letting edges sway. He turned to leave. Snow shifted behind him. He froze, listening. No clear shape visible. Only gentle line of wind-brushing field. He waited until stillness returned. Back home, Mara handed him mug of warm water. He sat slowly, body heavy. She asked if night quiet. He nodded with small motion. She placed hand on his shoulder, steady. Night nearly passed when faint tap at window stirred him. Tomas rose quietly. He opened door instead of window. Snow drifted inward. At base of step, another bundle, but smaller. He picked it up and brought inside. He unwrapped cloth near fire. Inside, thin string of dried leaves tied together with stripped bark fiber. Leaves crumbled between fingers but scent sharp, unlike local herbs. He placed string next to seeds and carvings. Before dawn, Tomas slept again. Morning arrived with pale sun. He woke to children tapping his shoulder. They wanted to help place new markers. He agreed after chores. They dressed in coats and lined up sticks on table. Mara helped pack cloth squares for each dot. Tomas guided them along path, placing markers at safe intervals. Children pressed snow around base, giggling. He reminded them to stay close, voices low. When they reached ridge, he stopped them. He knelt and pointed at hollow where first bundles appeared. He asked children to step back. They obeyed, sensing shift in his tone. Thomas placed final marker there, pressing stake into ground. He turned and led children home before wind rose. Back inside, Mara handed them warm broth. Thomas sat by fire, hands steady now. Afternoon, Thomas worked ceiling cracks near windows. Mara prepared travel packs for next journey. Children rolled blankets tight. Muted excitement moved across home. After repairs, Thomas walked to hall to discuss next travel date. Priest chose 2 days from now, weather permitting. Joran would join again. Pavel might stay to repair fences. Thomas agreed to lead first stretch. Evening fell. Thomas walked outside briefly. Snow crunched beneath boots. Stars faint but present. He looked south once more. Quiet stretched long. He returned inside and sat near fire until sleep took him. Thomas woke before light touched the frost on the window. He sat up slowly, feeling joints stiff from work and travel. He listened to soft breaths of Mara and the children, then stood and stirred embers until small sparks rose. He warmed his hands and stepped outside into dim morning. Snow no longer fell in thick blankets, but wind brushed loose crystals into small curls across the ground. The surface hardened overnight, thin crust cracking under boots. He carried tools to haul for final preparations before next journey south. Joran waited with rope coiled over shoulder. Pavel stood near map, pointing at new detour inland to avoid creek. Thomas traced route with finger, marking places to rest. Priest handed poach with dried roots, small enough to carry but enough to keep them steady through long hours. They checked sled runners, tightening pegs and pressing oil into wood. Thomas pulled sled a short distance to test glide. Smooth enough. He returned to hall where Mara arrived with thick cloth squares lined with red thread. She gave Thomas one more for his inner pocket. He pressed it flat against coat, grateful. Children clung to his legs before running to help stack firewood, their cheeks flushed from cold. Thomas knelt, held each child close, then stood and prepared to leave again. He tied scarf low across face to block wind. They set off by midday, sled dragging behind. Snow thinned but still deep enough to slow steps. Sun weak but visible. They followed markers Thomas placed earlier, each piece a silent guide in field of white. Ground uneven, covered by hidden dips and frozen ridges. When they reached first bend north of creek, wind picked up. Snow rose in curls and spun across path. Thomas lowered lantern, though no darkness yet. He planted stakes along route to guide return. Joran carried second rope coil. Tying knots through loops, secured 2 wooden stakes. As they approached grove, where footprints first appeared weeks ago, Thomas paused. Snow packed heavy beneath pines. He knelt and pressed glove into surface. No fresh prints. He stood and nodded for group to continue. Mid-afternoon, they reached wide field, sloping gently downward. Sun dipped behind clouds. They rested against low mound of snow, building small fire shielded by sled. Thomas boiled water with roots and seeds. They drank while leaning against packs. Before they moved on, faint shape appeared across field. Hooded figure again, walking slow. Closer this time, though still distant. Thomas stood, but did not call out. The figure stopped at equal distance, head tilted slightly. Snow blew between them, masking details. Thomas waited, breath calm. Figure raised one arm, not waving, only holding small item in hand, then lowered arm and walked toward line of trees. Thomas watched until shape faded. Joran gripped rope, uneasy but silent. Pavel looked down, lips pressed tight. Thomas moved forward several steps, checking snow for sign of feet. Tracks present, light but clear. Direction south. He placed small stick to mark point where tracks crossed their path, then returned to sled. They chose to continue main route. They walked for another hour. Snow darkened under early dusk. Thomas called time to turn back. They packed fire and followed ropes placed earlier. Night chilled air fast. Stars faint. Crossing fields, they reached ridge, then village lights flickered. When they approached hall, children ran out with blankets. Mara waited at door, face lit by a small lantern. Thomas placed sled aside and stepped inside, warmed by familiar scent of stew. He sat by fire, shoulders heavy. Mara asked how far they reached. He told her they reached field beyond grove. She nodded, not asking for details. She placed warm stones near his boots to ease cold. Children sat on floor with wooden carvings. They traced lines Thomas carved earlier. He smiled, though eyes tired. He ate slow, savoring change and broth. Later that night, Thomas walked outside alone. Wind almost silent. Snow thin. He reached boundary tree once more and touched bark. In hollow beneath roots, he found new piece of cloth folded tight. Inside, a flat stone carved with 3 marks. He held it long, feeling ridges carved deep. He placed stone in inner pocket and remained still. Listening to night, he walked home slow, steps quiet. Inside, Mara looked up, knowing he carried something new even without words. She placed hand on his chest. He placed stone in her palm. She examined grooves, then returned it to him. They sat side by side, fire fading low. Morning arrived quietly. Thomas rose and stacked wood by door. He sorted packs for next attempt, though no date set. Children helped arrange blankets for travel. Mara prepared cloth for trade bundles. Afternoon villagers gathered by hall. They spoke softly of shadows moving near ridge. Thomas listened, feeling weight shift from winter survival to careful watchfulness. Priest asked Thomas to prepare small group to observe distance rather than chase unknown steps. Thomas agreed. He spent rest of day carving new markers. This time, he carved smaller shapes to leave in pairs, one facing village, one facing open fields. He wrapped them in cloth bundles. Evening, he walked path with Joran. Snow darker in moonlight. They placed 2 markers at edges of grove. No sounds except soft crack of branches bending under frozen weight. On return, they saw faint ember glow near base of distant tree. Not fire, maybe lantern extinguished moments earlier. Thomas slowed, waited, then continued home. Inside, Mara handed him bowl of warm water. He held it with 2 hands, letting heat ease tension. Children snored lightly across quilt. Night passed steady. Thomas woke with faint light pressing through thin frost on the window. He sat up slowly, steadying himself before rising. His coat still held chill from night air. He warmed it by the fire, then draped it across shoulders. Mara slept deeply, exhaustion from sewing late into the night pulling her into heavy rest. Children slept curled under double quilts, legs tangled. He stepped outside into morning that felt different. Snow crust thinner. Air smelled faintly of wet bark. He walked to ridge path and saw patches of earth peeking through where snow pulled back. He pressed boot into soft spot, noting damp soil beneath. He returned to barn to feed animals. Goat restless again, nudging gate. Thomas laid fresh straw and poured warm water. He repaired loose plank along wall that sagged from thaw. Tools worked faster now, metal not frozen into stiff shape. Mara stepped outside carrying cloth squares to dry in pale light. She hung them along rope near door, pinning each corner. Snow on roof melted slow, dripping in thin lines. Children followed with small baskets for collecting sticks scattered across field. Thomas guided them to dry ground patches safe to walk. Later morning, villagers gathered near hall to discuss next travel attempt. Priest warned Thor might flood creek and create sink pockets beneath snow. Thomas noted new path needed farther west, avoiding hollow ground. Joran agreed and marked route on plank. After meeting, Thomas walked toward Grove alone. Snow patches thinned near trees, revealing rough roots. He traced boundary where footprints once appeared. No tracks today, only scattered branches and soft dirt. He crouched and lifted handful of soil. Still cold, but not solid. He continued deeper until he reached place where figures stood nights before. Branches shielded sky. Patches of ground showed signs of someone sitting, snow flattened into smooth surface. He placed hand on area and stayed still. Wind brushed leaves above. Returning, he found piece of fabric near fallen log. Smaller than earlier cloths. Edges burned slightly. He picked it up and placed in pocket. He studied bark chips scattered around, not from local trees. Someone carried wood from farther south or west. He gathered a handful for later. By midday, Thomas helped repair fence posts tilted by melt. Pavel hammered stakes, while Tamars packed snow around bases. They worked until path stable. Villagers carried heavy stones to place along edges, preventing collapse. Mara prepared lunch of broth thickened with seeds. Children helped grind grains while steam filled home. Thomas sat near table, eating slowly. He told Mara ground grew soft near Grove. She listened, lips pressed thin. She said Thor would change every path. Afternoon, Thomas carried carved markers to new trail. Snow, slippery now, wet beneath surface. He pushed markers deeper to hold firm. Joran joined him halfway, eyes scanning tree line. No movement, but both felt presence unseen. On return, they met Henrik limping toward hall, leaning on cane. He spoke of hearing quiet steps near his shed before dawn. Thomas asked direction. Henrik pointed west. They walked there together. Snow melted enough to reveal thin line pressed into mud. Too light for heavy boots. Barefoot or thin sole. Thomas traced outline. Old track, maybe from last night. He folded cloth scrap from log and compared. Fibers lined with ash matched direction Henrik indicated. Thomas placed cloth back in pocket and lowered head, thoughtful but calm. Evening breeze blew warmer. Houses shed icicles from roofs. Water pooled at base of walls. Thomas guided children to gather stones to form small channels, redirecting water downhill. They worked slowly until ground drained. Night arrived with soft rain, first since winter sealed land. Drops tapped roof gently. Thomas stepped outside, letting rain touch coat. Air held promise of shifting season, though cold remained tight around edges. He walked to ridge again. Path, slippery but passable. Boundary tree darker now, bark damp. He checked hollow under roots. No new bundles. He placed piece of fabric from log inside hollow, weighed with stone. He stepped back as he turned. Faint breath of light flickered between pines. Not lantern glow, more like reflection. Tomas stared until shape faded behind trunks. He whispered brief thanks to night. Back home, he removed wet coat and hung it near fire. Mara offered towel and pressed his hands warm. Children slept deep after long day. Tomas sat near shelf holding carved tokens, seeds, bark, cloth. Rain tapped window. He slept lightly, though rest felt fuller. In morning, ground wetter, snow heavy. Tomas rose to prepare for travel day. Joran and Pavel met him at hall. Priest blessed path, though rain still fell. They packed lighter today, travel short. Meant to scout new route rather than reach southern post. They walked slow, testing ground. Snow collapsed beneath feet into slush. They used long poles to test stability. They crossed first open patch and reached grove. Tomas paused, scanning shadows. Beyond trees, ground dipped, mud deep. They turned back early, deciding thought anew for safe journey. They marked route with stones before leaving. Back in village, Tomas placed coat on chair and sat heavily. Mara handed him mug of warm water. Children climbed onto his lap. He held them, eyes closing a moment. Night approached quietly. Tomas woke to the sound of water sliding beneath snow. Slow currents moved under crust, loosening months of stillness. He rose and wrapped coat around shoulders, sensing ground change more than hearing it. The hearth held faint warmth. Mara slept on her side, arms around children. Tomas placed another stick on coals and watched flame rise. He slipped outside before dawn, air damp. Snow sank under each step, soft enough to swallow boots. He walked toward ridge path. The markers he set last week leaned slightly, bases weakened by melt. He pushed each deeper into mud until stable again. As he worked, grey light spread across horizon, quiet and hushed. He turned west toward Grove, where ground drained slower. Mist clung to low branches. He stepped past roots shaped by months of frost and reached clearing where footprints once circled in silence. The hollow showed new change. Snow melted fully here, leaving exposed earth packed flat. Someone stood here again, heavy enough to leave marks even during thaw. Tomas knelt and traced fresh depressions. He counted steps leading north, then shifting east toward High Ridge. No drag marks, no dropped cloth, only presence marked by earth. He stood, hands on hips, eyes scanning low fog. He returned to village and found Joran waiting outside hall, pointing to creek. Ice cracked during night and split into long jagged lines. Water rose under surface, pushing slabs upward. Tomas walked close and bent low. Water moved wide under banks. They stepped back as ground softened. Priest gathered small group by hall door. He spoke softly about adjusting travel plans. Creek crossing no longer safe. They would shift route through higher land west of Grove when snow thinned further. Tomas led group to mark new points. They carried stones and placed them in stacks high enough to see once snow melted. Later morning, Tomas returned home. Mara laid coats across bench, stitching thicker straps across shoulders so weight of packs rested evenly when travel resumed. Children wrote lines with charcoal on wood scraps, imitating Tomas's markers. He stopped to watch their hands move, steady and bright. He prepared stew from dried roots, warm water, seeds, and thin slivers of goat hide. Steam curled through air, filling room with soft, earthy scent. He handed bowl to Mara, then one to each child. They ate slow, savoring small strength by midday. Tomas stepped outside again, drawn to ridge by pull stronger than curiosity. Snow thinned along edge, revealing old sticks snapped earlier in season. He followed line of wet soil stitched with hoofprints and bear tracks. Some faint, some deeper. He followed until reaching slope he did not climb earlier at summit, wind-brushed face. Below, wide stretch of land opened, dotted with patches of grass freed from snow. In distance, smoke rose from low cluster of trees, faint but present, not large enough for town. Maybe camp. Tomas stood still, heart slow but firm. He walked down slope slowly. Snow gone here in uneven patches. Mud slid under boots. He kept steady, hands out to balance. Halfway down, he found fallen branch wrapped in cloth. He lifted branch. Fibers stained from soot. He folded cloth and placed in coat. He breathed slow and returned uphill, not pushing deeper. Back home by late afternoon, villagers approached him, noticing mud on boots. Henrik asked if southern path cleared. Tomas said ground soft and creek split. Joran asked if he saw anything beyond ridge. Tomas gave small nod, subtle, leaving details quiet. Joran understood without pressing. They returned to hall to prepare lines for next departure. Tomas showed map adjustments, shifting arrows west, away from creek. Priest-approved plan. Pavel stored supplies in crates to keep dry. Evening approached. Rain returned, soft at first, then steady. Roof dripped into buckets placed along beams. Tomas patched leak near window frame. Mara dried cloth near fire. Children played under table, feet tucked near stones. Later, Tomas stepped outside under rain. He walked to boundary tree, bark dark from moisture, soil soft beneath roots. He crouched and checked hollow. Nothing new. He placed small wood chip carved earlier into hollow, pressing it beneath smooth bark. He rose and stood long, letting rain soak coat as he turned to leave. Faint outline appeared beyond grove. Hooded figure again, though shape blurred by rain. Not silent like before. Shoulders sagged, steps uneven. Tomas lifted hand, but did not move forward. Figure stood still, then lifted hand in return, slow and tired. Rain wove strands of water between them. Figure turned away, walking east along ridge. No rush, no fear, only steady distance. Tomas watched until shape dissolved into grey air. He walked home, steps heavy but calm. Inside, he removed wet coat and placed near stones to dry. Mara handed towel and pressed her forehead to his chest. Children slept with arms around each other. Tomas sat by fire, staring at flickering light. He placed new cloth and branch pieces beside pylon's shelf. He arranged carvings in slow sequence. 3 marks on stone, 3 on wood, 3 stitched lines, a path, a sign, a shared language between strangers. He slept deeply that night. Morning came with clearer sky. Snow melted into long streams trickling past fences. Tomas helped villagers dig channels to guide water downhill. They placed stones to support walls. Houses safe from flooding now. By midday, ground near ridge nearly bare. Grass flattened beneath snow began to lift. Tomas walked path once more with Joran and Pavel. They tested hill soil and confirmed new route stable. They planned departure for 2 days, waiting for final thaw along bank. He returned home early to prepare packs. Mara folded coats with patches complete. Children placed wooden tokens in pockets, believing each token protective. Tomas placed seeds, bark and cloth in one pouch, carrying silent memory of winter. Night settled gentle. Rain stopped. Sky cleared, stars bright. Tomas walked outside alone. He stood at ridge, air cool but softer. He looked across land, grateful winter eased grip. He closed eyes and whispered thanks for hidden hands that left food, seeds, and signs. He did not seek name or face. Silence enough. He returned home, lay beside Mara, and slept without waking. Thank you for resting here tonight. Your breath softer now, your hands warm. Winter passed slowly in this village, but spring waited with patience. When the next story begins, we will walk through snow again, though on different soil and with different travelers. Before you leave, I will prepare a small gift for you, a written note of quiet lines to read when sleep hides from you. Rest tonight.